Milk outside a bag of milk, outside of a bag of milk continues on its prequel, revealing much more information about the personal life of the protagonist who seems to have social anxiety alongside other undisclosed diagnoses. You can watch my last video on the first game to catch up with the story, which I will link in the comment section and the card above. Hi folks, I'm R and welcome to the video. You amazing person. Send me your game suggestions on Twitter, which I could cover in the upcoming videos, just like this one. Keep in mind that this video will have spoilers about both of the first game and the second game. With that said, let's begin. Following the events of the first game, the protagonist heads to her bed after a terrifying and unpleasant encounter with her mother, an encounter which she finds unpleasant. Playful shadow entities dancing around the protagonist seem as if they want her to lose control and spin mindlessly, to which she resists and reaches her room. Just as she closes the door, she feels cold breeze coming from the other side of the door, mentioning to herself that it feels as if a living corpse is in the kitchen, blowing cold air through the keyhole. She then continuously repeats to herself that there's no corpse in the kitchen, as if she cannot stop herself from thinking it over and over. The buzzing thought keeps repeating in her mind, which makes her uncomfortable, forcing her to check the kitchen. Instead of calmly visiting the kitchen, the protagonist rushes out of her room in a panic, waving her arms up in the air, bumping into the door and making it fly open. Arriving at the kitchen, the protagonist is relieved that only the bag of milk she purchased earlier sits on the countertop. After apologizing to the bag of milk for taking it out of the safe shelves of the supermarket to her house where it'll be drunk, she heads back to her bed when the monstrous entity representing her mother appears, grabbing her heart, sniffing her entire body. The creature, visibly annoyed at the protagonist, utters in a horrifying tone that something has happened again, which confuses the protagonist. The creature then orders the protagonist to stay still when she pokes her arm with one of her long pointy fingers, piercing her skin and injecting her with her venom. Being confused, the protagonist slides to the floor, mentioning that it's happened many times before, when she pushes herself to remember the times before that this happened and to what is going on. But the pain and the heat rushing through her body makes her give up to forgetfulness, letting the poison take over her body. Just as she is feeling paralyzed, the creature makes her repeat a line, saying that she will never drink milk again. The creature, being angry and shouting from the top of her lungs, orders the protagonist to repeat over and over again, which she adheres to and repeats non-stop. It becomes clear that when the protagonist went to the kitchen, staring at the bag of milk with sinister intentions, she in fact drank from it, having a lapse of memory. This led to her mother being represented as a monster, sniffing her and realizing she drank milk, which she is apparently allergic to. The mother, concerned about her daughter, who constantly risks her life and drinks something she could die from, injects her with an EpiPen, saving her from going into an anaphylactic shock. She clearly mentions it's something she has done many times before, asking her to repeat that she would never drink milk again. After all the mishaps, the protagonist manages to finally get to her room and get comfy. After performing her evening routine, she's left with taking the variety of pills she's prescribed with for her condition. Instead of just taking the bunch in one go, as she usually does, she carefully studies each pill and finds an excuse not to take them. Instead, she creates her own imaginary pill and points out to each body part that has been treated and not hurting any longer. Feeling proud to what she has done, she questions herself to why she never did this before, keeping this a secret from her mother, knowing full well she wouldn't approve of it. Not feeling like sleeping and wanting to stay up, the protagonist starts having an internal conversation with herself, talking to an imaginary character she has created for herself. Representing the pill she's taking, the voice of wisdom, helping and encouraging the protagonist to cope with the confusing life. The pill, being the voice of wisdom, instructs the protagonist that she needs to sleep, to which she refuses and pleads with the imaginary character to talk with her. The character, being the pill, says that it will stay silent until its effects wear off. to which the protagonist becomes anxious, as this would mean that the imaginary character would disappear. She even orders the pill that its purpose is to be there for her and to make her feel better. After some time, trying desperately to hold on to her sanity, the protagonist starts hallucinating and feeling like she's losing control over her body. The pill comes to her and tries to make her feel better, as it's something it's obligated to do. The protagonist then explains that she felt like she could take control. She wanted to be able to have control and not be pathetic, relying on the pills. She then explains that an unbearable pain is multiplying in force, with memories coming back, hurting her more and more, something she thought she could overcome by herself. Nonetheless, being defeated and feeling useless, she goes to her pills and takes them one by one. Lying down in her room, trying to collect and organize her thoughts, she's assisted by her pill to think of them as fireflies, as the visual cue could make it easier. As she proceeds to visualize the fireflies buzzing above her, she loses her cool and screams loudly, causing the fireflies, her thoughts, scatter all over out of sight. As she gets up, she starts feeling bad and asking the pill for help. Struggling to collect her thoughts and keep calm, the pill reassures her as a friend, telling her that she can try again. The pill suggests moving her items and rearranging them so they can find the fireflies easier, but the protagonist soon has a panic attack, refusing to move anything, unable to explain why she doesn't want anything to be moved. She then explains that she pretended to be a character in a visual novel game while shopping for milk earlier, which helped her immensely. Now deciding to be a character in a point-and-click game, helping her find her thoughts, represented as fireflies hiding in her room. Looking around the room, the pill notices some pictureless photographs hung on the wall, which the protagonist explains that they are there to cover the cracks on the wall, seemingly indicating that she punched the wall in fits of rage in the past. Grabbing some of the fireflies, she starts to remember that she used to go to school but never managed to graduate. She remembers that on the last day, her dad picked her up early, telling her she's too old for the class she's studying in, seemingly being stuck in a class due to her mental health issues, not able to move on to the next, then denying to remember anymore. It's only through the pill pressing on the matter more when she explains that she didn't leave the class that easy. She started screaming and scratching the father, a scene that she explains to have been ordinary for the teachers, something that the protagonist did a lot of the times, unable to control her anger. This in a way could potentially indicate that the protagonist might have been on the spectrum of autism, especially mentioning earlier that she saw dancing shadow figures, which made her feel like spinning and uncontrollably waved her hands up in the air. Although autism has a wide spectrum, with many having variety of different traits or none at all, with someone having autism being very different to the other, some common traits are known as self-stimulatory behaviors, including spinning, rocking, or flapping hands. But keep in mind, just because one or many could associate to certain traits or behaviors, not all are the same. Some people with autism have high functionality, while deeper in the spectrum, some rely on daily care. The pill pressing more on the matter, the story becomes more grim, with the protagonist explaining that the father bought milk on that day, with the mother not being even present at home. Moving on, the protagonist explains that she has memories of the location of every item in her room, seeing them so vividly and clearly, something the pill wouldn't understand, hence why she doesn't like them being moved. This trait could be associated with obsessive-compulsive disorder, described as someone having a tendency towards excessive orderliness, perfectionism, and great attention to detail. However, I'm not a doctor. Regardless of having studied science and worked as a social worker working with clients with autism, certain traits are very general and can be linked to many different conditions, or simply it could be a personal trait not associated to any condition or disorder at all. That being said, everything is specifically intended in movies or games to create a plot and give the character a life, someone we can empathize with, associate with, or simply root for. Therefore, all the vague general traits are slowly unveiling what it is that prevents the protagonist from functioning the way she wants to, not feeling restrained or suffocated. As the protagonist feels sad thinking about the past, the pill suggests to her stepping into the balcony and taking some fresh air. When she mentions she avoids it as she gets panic attacks, mentioning that she feels there's someone watching her there. She goes nonetheless, observing the hollow inside of the building, attached from end to end. The protagonist then mentions how remembering makes her suffer and hurt, wishing she could only remember certain things, and not everything. She proceeds to take a leap, and as she has a long fall, she confesses a horrible memory that bugs her till today. She talks about a friend she had online just like many others she spoke to, but this one felt different. He showed more personality and emotion, seeming real, someone the protagonist called her best friend. She confides in him all her secrets about her condition and about the vulnerabilities. That's when she realizes trusting someone was a mistake, as he uses her as a stepping stone for himself to be the cool kid, sending an army of bots harassing her and making her feel miserable. The boy she foolishly called her best friend took videos and images of her through her laptop, sharing them online, humiliating her, with their images and videos never leaving the face of internet. That's why wherever she goes, outside or indoors, on the balcony or online, she feels as if she's being observed and stared at by shadows, entities that resided within the internet. Entities that didn't seem real apart from their pre-assigned role to be bystanders to her shame and humiliation, be cyberbullies, or just simply indifferent, just like usernames and pixels on her screen. Just as she tries to expand, she reaches the ground, shattering to pieces, explaining it's her second death today, or second way of dying that she thinks about, with the first death being a visualization of her being strangled, which she thought of earlier. Back to reality, out of her deep and puzzling mind, she's back to her room, informing the pill that their time together is short as she won't be taking the pill any longer. Lying down in her sleeping bag, she asks the pill a last favor, something she's scared to ask when she awakens in a dream world, finding a boy called Triska in a park. Triska acts very strange, shifting between being happy and unhappy, being direct and harsh, and yet being kind and needy. He asks the protagonist with helping him buy milk, something that annoys her, confessing that she doesn't like him. They soon reach the store with a sign mentioning that it's closing in 20 minutes, just playing out as the first game story when she arrived at the store with it closing in 15 minutes. Triska keeps asking the protagonist questions which irritates her to the point of wanting to slap him. Both seemingly being the same age, Triska acts much younger than what he looks like, as if he's a hyperactive child. While at the store looking for milk, Triska rushes towards a man, asking him where they sell milk. The protagonist, not able to hear them, sees the man being visibly agitated. Going to them, he observes Triska frozen in place, shaking and seeming as if he's hypnotized. The man, visibly angry, says if the boy is hers and that he wants her to take him away from him. As she takes Triska away, he explains that he got scared, then shaking rapidly and starting to scream uncontrollably. The protagonist tries to hold his mouth when Triska bursts into tears and starts crying. The protagonist tells him to act normal when he explains that she simply doesn't understand. The protagonist, clearly angry, tells him off that annoying people is not a good thing when Triska runs away, not wanting to hear any longer. After some time, she finds him at the cash register, with the cashier being angry, being extremely harsh, ordering the protagonist to pay extra for the additional waiting, and that Triska is stupid, insulting the boy, calling him a retard, with the line of the people behind him nodding in agreement. This shows the horrible reality, how these people are not understanding of Triska's clear condition, treating him so harshly. The protagonist, despite being annoyed at Triska, feels the gravity of the injustice, throwing the extra money at the cashier and leaving with Triska. On the way back, they walk in absolute silence until Triska breaks it, asking if the protagonist likes ice cream, to which she responds no. Triska, realizing that the protagonist doesn't want to help, walks to the busy highway with determination, looking back at the protagonist, saying that now he understands that she doesn't want to help at all. Shocked to the stream, the protagonist jumps out of her sleep, bursting into tears uncontrollably. She then observes the hollow void expanding, seemingly trying to consume her. The void that she was terrified of in the previous game, a representation of loneliness and silence. The boy in her dream clearly represented the protagonist herself to how she is seen through the outside perspective. She is in fact hyperactive, with her mood shifting constantly, asking too many questions and struggling to communicate with people, making them lose their patience and become uncomfortable. She's terrified of people, and when her emotions overwhelm her, she screams and cries loudly, unable to control her actions. The stream made her understand how difficult it must be for her mother taking care of her, that even she herself couldn't cope with someone like herself. Understanding the perspective of her mother, who despite having recently lost her husband, still loves the protagonist and takes care of her, which makes her burst into tears. Also understanding that she might live the rest of her life alone in the void that is slowly consuming her. Managing to find all of the fireflies and avoiding the balcony and the death by strangulation, the protagonist goes to bed having a strange dream while standing in front of the mirror. It's the same day repeating itself, the very first day of school, with the protagonist looking at herself in the mirror, overanalyzing and not wanting to look stupid in front of the others at school. Trying to reassure herself and that there's nothing wrong with being different, she gradually gets worse and more peculiar at appearance, looking more and more different. That's when she has a final look at the mirror, being completely faceless, when she mentions that she feels great. That's when she awakens yet again, bursting into tears, with the void approaching her. This in a way could have multiple interpretations, but my own is that the protagonist subconsciously knows that she's different, trying hard to reassure herself that everything will be okay. It seems to be a representation of her bad memory going to school the first day and the fear she had to overcome. She becomes only more and more different the more she tries to reassure herself, until she becomes absolutely faceless, as if her identity is taken away from her, which could be an allegory of taking the pills, trying to submerge all of her traits so that she can be accepted in society. It's only then that she regards the morning as excellent, barring herself and personality. That's when she wakes up crying, with the memories consuming her. Not being able to find all the fireflies and stopping the search, the protagonist awakens in a dream world, a cramped room with no furniture. The cold air from the other side of the room makes the protagonist shiver when the ceiling above her starts moving upwards, letting debris fall down. The other walls around her move outwards as well, making the small room bigger and bigger. She then notices an unrecognizable entity, which she starts following. That's when the ground beneath her feet collapses and she falls through it. She's then teleported to a field with tall stalks of grass at nighttime, with the moon shining brightly. In the field, she's slowly stalked by an entity that doesn't leave her sight despite her running relentlessly, when the dark entity quickly approaches her, which makes her jump out of bed. Similarly to the other endings, she gets up crying and seeing the void approaching. This ending is unlocked when the protagonist avoids both death sequences and only collects a few fireflies before going to bed. When she's in bed, the dream shows a bleak and terrifying vision, a long endless column with thin metallic stairway spiraling around it. Not sure if going up or down, being stuck in the middle of the way, an entity then appears, not having any semblance to humans. Many more columns then soon appear, with the non-human creature assisting the protagonist, showing how many more just like the protagonist are stuck this way. That's when the protagonist's legs start moving on their own, with her only in control of which direction she can move, up, down, or into the bottomless abyss. The protagonist chooses to change directions going down when the entity mentions that she probably made a mistake or talked the wrong way. Nonetheless, she shouldn't change directions and should get used to her new life. It further explains, despite this world being unbearable and difficult, she should think that the world is as it is for her. And instead of thinking of changing it, she should accept it and appreciate being alive and using it to its fullest where it allows. As the entity tries to be more spiritual and motivational, the protagonist yet again jumps out of bed and starts crying. This dream can act as an allegory to her difficult life, alongside many others who share her condition, being limited to what they can choose. And despite making mistakes, she should accept this is the way she is and that she cannot change herself. And instead of living every day upset, thinking things could be different and she could be born different, she should instead appreciate the life she's given and use the most of it. Skipping both death sequences, finding all the fireflies and finding a secret note, this ending is unlocked. The note seems to be a number to a pizzeria, as in the protagonist's dream, she calls the number and orders a pizza. The strange dream consists of a person taking her order while she talks about her personal life, preferring to be in a barren world where nothing bad nor good happens. Somewhere that is safe, somewhere that you won't get hurt. Walking all day, texting on the phone while the pizzeria is still taking her order, the protagonist then suddenly wakes up, yet again bursting into tears. The dream being self-explanatory to what it means, the void approaches her yet again, bringing the story to an end. Each ending and dream reveal different parts of the protagonist's thought process. She feels useless and alone, yet she wants to desperately accept who she is, but struggles to do so. It seems as if she's stuck in a limbo of her mind, not sure where her life is going. Despite all the different aspects of her dreams and thoughts being both motivational and cynical, the truth is that she's experiencing the expanding void, slowly taking over her, a buzzing silence and emptiness, not clear to what it would do when it finally reaches the protagonist. What a brilliant game. Hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. It's been your host Star. Thanks for being here, you amazing audience. Until the next time, have a fantastic day.